Greetings everyone, and as you saw in the title, today's video is a bit different than usual than my gameplay videos that I usually upload. Like it says, I wanna talk a bit about the longevity of Steel Division Normandy 44 and why I believe it will have a shorter lifespan than Wargame, I guess you could say. But before I get into it, two things. First of all, I'm not just trying to shit talk the game or anything for whatever reason because I like Wargame more or anything like that. I like the game, I think it will be a good game. I will play it on release and beyond release. But it is how it is. A lot of these things you can see now already in the beta with only 4 divisions and 2 maps released, or well, including the 3 maps we were able to see in the Paradox livestream. And the second thing is, not everyone might think this way, especially people who play the game for its authenticity and stuff like that. They might probably play Steel Division Normandy 44 longer than Wargame, because I know that a decent amount of people who are mostly interested in, again, the authenticity didn't play a lot of Wargame, especially Red Dragon, because they were like, prototypes, these are unrealistic, this and that. This is not what this is about. It's more about the people like me, and there's a lot of people like that out there who play the game also just for its mechanics, for its vast content, you know? Like I don't really care what the tanks look like, what they are called. If it was me, I'd rather, like I mentioned in the live stream, I'd rather play a game where the tanks are pink dildos named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it has very good mechanics, than a game that can be authentic looking as fuck but with the worst gameplay. Okay? So gameplay for me in this kind of game has always more priority than authenticity. So you might not agree with that, and if you don't agree with that, then there's a good chance that you might also disagree with what I say in the video, or you might not experience what I say in the video. Now, I mentioned already that a lot of most of what I'm talking about can already be seen in the beta, with one exception maybe. So let's get into it. So the first reason why I believe that Steel Division Normandy 44 will lose its the whole thing, like, oh, today I'm gonna try this out, tomorrow I'm gonna try this out, and this and that type of feel, is because most of the decks really build itself for the most part. Now this is due to several reasons. For one, the phase system. You need to have roughly a decent amount of units, or a correct amount of units is probably the better way to express this, for every phase. So especially infantry, you have to have a good amount in phase A. You have to have an ability to deal with tanks, especially the Firefly in phase A. AA is not as important in phase A, for example, stuff like that. Then in phase B, you need to have like the middle ground, not too much, but also not too little. Then in phase C, you need all the high-end stuff. And not a lot of infantry anymore for the most part. Maybe one card where you get high availability, stuff like that. So that's already, very specific. The game already tells you should build the deck roughly like that. Now, on top of that, compared to Wargame, you have a lot less units available. It may look like much, but when you look at it, not too much different than Wargame. But unlike Wargame, if you have 2 cards of recon, they will get shown besides, and not, one card and it says 2 cards. So in reality, you have like 1, 2, 3 different units available. 4 with the scouts and different transports. That's 4 different units available. One of them available in 3 phases. Only in the recon tab. In the infantry tab, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is actually not that low when compared to Wargame. But you also gotta see, they all have that specific transport. In Wargame, a lot of units have a lot of different transports. So again, a lot more options, and I could do this in every tab. So okay, you might say, well, the divisions in Steel Division are basically like Wargame's nations, and as if they had specializations. So if you wanted to have a division like deck system in Wargame, you would probably just find decks like, instead of US, you would have US Armored and US Airborne, for example. Those are the decks you have available. You have no Einspec anymore, you have no Coalitions anymore, you have no General NATO or General Pact anymore. But the only German deck might be just a mechanized deck. And then you might say, well, the amount of units is not that different compared to, say, here a division. Well, that's sort of true. You also gotta see that here in Normandy 44, and that's probably also a bit based on realism, but still, not a single deck we have seen so far has selected a decent tank. For example, the Scottish Infantry Division. They have the Challenger, which is very strong. They have the Crocodile, which is incredibly strong. The Luftlande Division, an airborne division. They have Stuck. The Infantry Division from the beta, they had a Jagdpanther, which was the strongest tank in the game, if I remember correctly, in the beta. And stuff like that. So you would also see that most likely, if we had the type of deck system in Wargame, stuff like US Airborne might roll around with an M1A1 Abrams on top of that, and other stuff to fill holes. So even if we had that in Wargame, Wargame would still have a lot more choice. And that also then on top of that, of course, you have no way to influence how many slots you have. If you want to play with the Jagdpanther, and only the infantry division has it, then the deck already tells you how to play it, how to use the Jagdpanther, and what kind of what kind of deck to use the Jagdpanther. You can't really adjust your deck to, let's say, a Jagdpanther's playstyle. Like you, for example, in Wargame, you could say like, okay, I'm gonna choose a lot of cheap tanks, you know, and one super heavy, and just super heavy kills, and the cheap tanks are just there for meat shields and killing infantry and stuff like that. Or I'm just gonna go a lot of medium tanks, or mostly or just on heavy and super heavy tanks, stuff like that. You can't necessarily do that in Steel Division, because your deck just might not allow you to take that many tanks and stuff like that, even though you would like. So yeah, the whole deck system, it is a lot less, variety, I would say. I am very certain that once the game is released, if you compare all the decks, that they will all have the same, let's say, 70% of the units, which is a core, and then just 30% of units that differ from deck to deck. So that means that there's a lot less skill and knowledge involved in building a deck. It doesn't have to be bad necessarily, but it also means that building a right deck is a lot less important. Unless, I mean, of course, you could just fuck up and not take any phase A infantry or stuff like that, but barely anyone will do that. And only really for shits and giggles, but nobody's that stupid, really. So, the deck system is just dumbed down, I guess you could say. Has a lot less impact than before, and also offers a lot less variety, a lot less. It's a much smaller playground, I guess you could say. Like in Wargame, you had a big playground with deck system. You could say, okay, today I'm gonna play West Germany mechanized, or I'm gonna play French armored, and the deck would just vastly be completely different. Or French armored and French motorized would be a completely different deck with a lot of different units. I mean, here you could say, okay, well, we have Germany and 9 specializations of Germany. Well, yeah, true, but in Wargame, you have the same nation with different specializations, and then like 7, 8, 9 other nations on top of that. You have coalitions, you have mixed NATO, which might be bad, might be good, but even without them, you would have a lot more variety. I mean, it also brings a lot more balance problems, but if we ignore the DLC nations, maybe the balance isn't that bad at the moment in Wargame. So it's not impossible, and you don't have to balance every unit. You just have to balance the units that are too strong and tone them down at the very least. If you don't want to bring up the other units to its level, just don't have the 4, 5, 6 units that are just ridiculously more strong than comparable units. You don't have to make every unit viable, but keep a set of units that are roughly on par, and every deck has a good amount of them, without any outliers, I guess you could say. The deck system is a huge difference, massively dumbed down, and offers just a lot less stuff to play with. Not mentioning that some units are even shared across divisions, like let's say the pack. Anyways, another thing is not only that also goes a bit with the deck building. Unit stats differ a lot less, I feel. Like it's obviously very nice to see. Yet when you see a unit, you can immediately see it is 13 AP and 3 front armor. I think that would massively help new players in Wargame. It is a very nice addition. There are a lot of quality of life additions that Steel Division Normandy 44 has, which I would absolutely love to see in Wargame. So I'm not trying to bash Steel Division here. It has a lot of good things, a lot of things that would also work perfectly in Wargame. But yeah, let's look at the tanks. Let's pay attention to their rate of fire. You have 7. You have 6. You have 7. You have 7, 6, 6, 6. Alright, 6 and 7, fairly well divided. I mean, that's fine, okay. Let's take a look at the third armored. You have 7, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Every Sherman has 6. Only this are those Stuarts? I'm not sure. I think those are Stuarts. Only the Stuarts have 5. Let's take a look at the Scots. Honey Stuart, 7. Churchill, 8. 6, 6, 6. Challenger, 6. 6. Aviary. I mean, Aviary doesn't count. Crocodile, 6. Okay. Let's take a look at the 12th SS. We have... Okay, that's some sort of autocannon. We have 6. Firefly has 6. 6, 6. Panther has 6. S6 has 6. This has also 6. In Wargame, you had a Leopard 1 with 10 rounds per minute. Leopard 2 with 9 rounds per minute. T-72s with 8 rounds per minute. The early T-72s with 7 rounds per minute. T-62s with 6 rounds per minute. You had outliers like the M8 AGS with 13 rounds per minute. You had autoloaders. You had stabilizers, which, as far as I know, none of the tanks here are, or only a very few tanks have stabilizers on the main gun. And again, it's not even shown on the unit card, but that's a different topic. And you had ATGMs on tanks. I think I mentioned autoloaders already. So not only do you have, let's say, no ATGMs, no autoloaders. Maybe there are a few units with autoloaders, but that's just based on history. But here you can again see tanks really mainly just consist of AP and armor. When does the rate of fire actually matter? It only really matters for anti-tank guns, and as far as I know, every anti-tank gun, except maybe for the small ones, have or the Jagdpanzer 4 also has 6 rounds per minute. All the anti-tank guns, except the small and early ones, like the 50mm pack, I believe they all pretty much have 8 rounds per minute. Again, the early one has 9. That's the small one. What about a 17 pounder? Also, Wolverine has 7 rounds per minute. The 17 pounder also has 6. So again, Oh, it actually has 6, not even 7. 8, okay. But still, that's really the only thing they actually vary. They have either 1000 meter range or 1200, or maybe even just 800 on some tanks. They have 6, 7 or 8 rounds per minute. Nearly every anti-tank gun or tank gun. And a lot less variety. Then a lot of the stuff just has there's no really heat mechanic to speak of. There's the infantry, which just have weird mechanics, a weird mechanic that I don't understand, but that barely plays a role. If a tank drives into a city full of anti-tank weapons on infantry, it will die. But that's just the only thing that matters really. But the only thing that you look on when buying a tank or getting a tank into your deck is AP and armor. You don't pay a lot of attention to the range. You don't pay a lot of attention to the rounds per minute. It's just, again, just dumbed down. Of course, some of the stuff is just based on history. I don't think a lot of tanks or any tanks had heat rounds. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know. So I'm not trying to bash Eugene for making this decision. Some of the stuff is just, if they want to have some sort of authenticity, they have to do that. So I can understand it, but still, Wargame has a difference. Then there's the thing. Wait, what do I talk next? Okay, let's go about on maps. Okay. I think that was all with units that I wanted to look at. So another thing was maps. So still some changes to destruction. So maybe I should have had an AI, but whatever. Now, before I go into the specific mechanics that Steel Vision lacks compared to Wargame, I want to talk a bit about maps. Actually, I should have chosen a bigger map to show it better. This isn't what I'm telling you is not necessarily as big of a deal in 1v1s as it is more in team games, but it is still there. And I think Slacks mentioned it yesterday on the Eugene Discord, Reddit Discord. So here we have this map. Here's a town. Here's a town. Okay. Now this is basically tank territory. This is tank territory. Now, with the lack of tanks being able to get into forests, tank fights or just tank engagements on these type of fields just are pretty much all the same. You hide behind the bush until your reinforcements arrive if the enemy has more range. Then you get your tanks out, move your infantry up or your cheap stuff, and your tanks shoot at his tanks. Or their tanks. This is basically all that happens. I mean, you might say, well, that's not too much different from Wargame. But Wargame also offers a lot of map diversity. For example, have you seen any real elevation on the map so far? I think on all the maps that we were able to play, only one map has some sort of elevation. That is point to hog. I can get into that in a second. Other than that, tank engagements just all feel the same. If the enemy has a jumbo, then you try to get 2 panthers to deal with a jumbo before the jumbo kills your panther and stuff like that. It's hard to explain, but it always revolves around the same playstyle scenario, and it also plays into the fact with infantry having a lot less range against tanks. Again, probably history based and stuff like that. So I'm not saying they have to buff it or anything like that. Infantry or there being no ATGMs whatsoever. Neither in infantry vehicles nor planes. So the only way to really engage with tanks is with tanks or with anti-tank guns, which are nothing but like immobile tanks, sort of, with a bit more stealth and a slightly higher rate of fire. So the whole tank engagements, no matter what map you play on, really, they are nearly always the same. The only real difference is maybe here around the factory, but that is more like an outlier. And the other thing is towns. In Wargame, towns were a huge deal. If you had, let's say, what's a good map? Let me think for a second. Let's say Hope and Glory. I guess I can show an example in a few minutes when I jump into Wargame to show you. If you had a town in Wargame, imagine this was Wargame, and you had this town, you would effectively shut down this area. Just with the town, with infantry inside the town, thanks to ATGMs. You would shut this down. Yes, the enemy could smoke you, but effectively you would shut this down, unless, of course, he attacks the town directly. But basically, this would be your territory, or my territory here. In Steel Division, this town gives you maybe this territory here. There's the problem with towns. Town fights and tank fights, they just don't... Well, of course they don't interact with each other, but they have no influence on each other. If I get this town, I can't really influence tank fights going on in here or in here. There's no way that tanks, if you have towns, that you have no way to interact with anything other than 100 meters away from it, because you have no ATGMs, for example. So tanks are just... They just don't fit into the playstyle really well, I think. They feel like two different modules of the game, tank fights and town fights. There's nothing in between. There's no transition between them. It's just, if, for example, in the 2 versus 2 map, the map ends here, and the town is just at the edge. If you have a town at the edge, you can basically ignore it, and due to the town being just, you know, a small portion of the map, you lose like that much ground. But you spend 200, 300 points, depending on what your enemy brings into town worth of units, and can push with the tanks into this area. Just put a unit here and basically stop enemy infantry from driving out. Of course, this is not true if there's, let's say, in the 1 versus 1 map where it stops here, you can't ignore the town because it covers so much area, and you would have to split the units to left and right, which is bad in 1 versus 1 in C Division. But the fact is that towns just... They aren't the fortresses, they aren't the choke, not choke points, they aren't the key points they used to be in Wargame. Which can be good, can be bad, it depends on how you look at it. But it makes the game play a lot less dull. Makes it a lot more focused on tanks. Of course, there will always be the need of a deck in a team game that can fight in towns. But in these type of scenarios where you can just ignore the town, you don't need it. And with the lack of ATGMs, like I said 5 times already, you can't interact with outside a town more than 100 meters. So this and the fact that all the open fields are basically the same with the bush on the left instead of the right this time, or a tree line a bit 5 meters closer to the enemy, makes all of the maps play the same. One exception is the steel factory on the right on this map. But other than that, if you also look at the maps they played on the Paradox stream when they showed off the game, they all basically look the same. And this is the only thing where you could say, well, that might change with release. They might make completely different maps with a lot of elevation, stuff like that. Yeah, that might be true, but I honestly kind of doubt it. Now this is, I think, the only map where I've seen a bit of elevation. Someone pointed it out to me. I think, yeah, here you can see a bit of elevation, but that's like the exception rather than a rule. And here again, just tree lines here and there, bushes here and there. Everything plays the same. There's no elevation. There's no deep forest to drive your tanks and infantry into, which just makes it play completely different. It's always the same, no matter really where you go. So this is the more direct stuff, the more obvious stuff. Well, I guess everything's obvious here, really. And now the last point, I think it's the last point, I hope I don't forget anything. Last point. Let me just pull up Wargame. It's not a live stream, but you get the point. Just 1 second. There we go. Okay. Now, last point is all the missing mechanics compared to Wargame. Here you can see the first thing, you have no helicopters. You also have no CVs, which is, in my opinion, a good thing, a very good thing. I absolutely love the frontline system. I think it could work very well in Wargame, maybe with some adjustments, but I think, or I actually really like it about Steel Division. The removal of command units is probably a very good thing. Okay, what is next? You are not able to refuel or repair units. Fuel would not fit very well in Steel Division since distances are much shorter and units arrive a lot quicker on the front line. That's probably also a good thing. Repairing, it's not like I guess they exchange repairing with a different kind of system. That crits like damaged engine or something are permanent. Which, I mean, it's a deliberate decision and not just they dumped it down. It's a different style, so I can understand that. But okay, here in ATGMs, there are no ATGMs. And this is actually a huge thing. Towns. This is the thing while towns are a lot less important unless they're in the middle of a map and are huge. And of course, like I said, don't interact with outside of the town very much. You have no AA infantry, which it's generally not a big of an issue, and I don't think it's a big difference. You have a lot less transports available. Which, okay, what am I doing? This is not a mechanic, I'm sorry. But I think that's mostly for infantry. One more thing, I think infantry in Steel Division Normandy 44 can use all their weapons at the same time. That means I think they have up to 4 weapons, so their SMG, their battle rifle, their MG, and their anti-tank weapon. I believe they can use everything at the same time, unless it is target prioritization being at work, because I know there's a lot more target prioritization in Steel Division than it was in Wargame. So that's again a nice addition to Steel Division compared to Wargame. Now we have in Steel Division there's also artillery and AA being in different categories. Okay, here we have the first thing, autoloader. I think we see a lot less autoloaders, again, somewhat realism, but also just a lot less variety of tanks, like I said. We don't have any helicopters, like I said. That means no rocket pods, no scout helicopters. There are scout planes, but there is no radar AA. There is no seed. So that's again some mechanics that are gone. Again, realism-wise, but it dumps the game down a bit. It makes it more accessible, of course, but it also makes it a lot less, well, not a lot, but if all the mechanics are added up, less rewarding for knowing the game well, for mastering the game. You know? And I think there are also no cluster bombs, again, no ATGMs on planes. So this is just, yeah, just a lot less variety you have there. Look at this, I have 3 Commonwealth decks, I have 3 Israel decks. And I could build a lot more that would be viable. I could build Commonwealth Mechanized, I could build Commonwealth Armored for team games. The 1 versus 1 decks and the team decks for Steel Division barely differ. They're not a lot different. Let's look at Commonwealth 1 versus 1 and look at the team game. I'm a lot more heavy on the tank side. I'm a lot more ASF side. I have less planes. I have more recon. I have a FOB. The whole, you know, you can see it for yourself. Okay, this Of course, this doesn't go for every deck. This deck is very similar to my 1 versus 1 deck. This one. But even then, you can just build a lot more different decks. Fausties, Nordic, nice. But I think you get the point. Get the point. A lot of mechanics, no HGMs on tanks. Yeah, I guess that concludes it. Again, I'm not just trying to bash it. I'm just trying to explain why I believe that it won't live as long as Wargame did. Unless they pump out a lot more DLCs, but that's a different kind of story. Again, in Wargame, if you played a different deck every day in Wargame, you could play for weeks. And even then, my Soviet deck might look a lot different to someone else's Soviet deck. For example, let's take the beloved Putin. I believe he has Moskaya Perota in the K-29 instead. He has VDV in the Scratchet. I believe he has Conquerors M in the MI8 MTV. And I believe he also has Morskaya in the BTR-90. Which I had before. But still, you don't see that difference in Steel Division decks. Partially because of the phase system. Partially because there are just a lot less units available. I hope I didn't forget anything. But that's it. Thank you very much for watching. And I see you next time.